Architectures of Spiritual Consciousness, the Devotional-Relational Mode. The Central Intuition. The devotional-relational mode often appears to be the simplest form of spiritual life. Its language is already familiar. Human beings know love, longing, gratitude, trust, dependence, intimacy, grief, fidelity, and surrender long before they enter a spiritual tradition. Songs, stories, poetry, and ordinary relationships teach the grammar of lover and beloved, parent and child, friend and companion, separation and reunion. Devotion, therefore, seems to require no unusual faculty. One need not master metaphysical argument, elaborate ritual, visionary perception, severe asceticism, or a comprehensive spiritual architecture. One needs only to love. This apparent simplicity has made devotional paths widely accessible. A sacred name can be remembered while walking. A hymn can be sung without intellectual training. Food can be offered, a prayer can be spoken, the deity can be approached through gratitude, grief, helplessness, affection, friendship, or service. The whole path may seem contained in one movement, turn the heart toward the beloved. Yet the same simplicity has caused devotion to be underestimated. Philosophical, contemplative, ritual, or esoteric traditions may regard it as a religion of emotion, consoling and beautiful, but lacking the precision or depth of more sophisticated paths. This judgment mistakes familiarity for shallowness. Devotion is not merely religious emotion, nor ordinary attachment redirected toward a divine object. Its deeper work is the transformation of the structure through which a person loves. Ordinary love is rarely pure. It carries longing for security, recognition, possession, protection, reciprocity, identity, and relief from loneliness. We want to be chosen, remembered, needed, forgiven, and assured that we will not be abandoned. Even generous love often contains an unspoken bargain. Devotion takes this complicated field and places it in relation to what the person experiences as ultimate. The beloved may be encountered as Lord, Mother, Father, Friend, Child, Bridegroom, Indwelling Presence, Divine Name, Sacred Form, or Living Thou. The theology differs, but the central intuition remains. Ultimate reality is not merely something to know, obey, realize, or dissolve into. It can be loved. The sacred is experienced not only as truth, emptiness, consciousness, law, power, or metaphysical ground, but as one toward whom the whole being may turn. The ears hear the name and stories of the beloved, the voice praises, calls, sings, and prays. The mind remembers, the eyes behold the sacred form, the hands prepare offerings and perform service, the body bows, imagination enters divine narrative, emotion becomes longing, gratitude, trust, grief, friendship, tenderness, and surrender. Action becomes service, possession becomes offering. Life itself may gradually be received as relationship. This is devotion's extraordinary power. It does not require emotion to disappear before spiritual life can begin. It takes affection, desire, grief, memory, vulnerability, and the need for relation, forces that may remain untouched by philosophical understanding, and attempts to transform them from within. A person may understand that the separate self is unstable and remain emotionally imprisoned. They may reason correctly about the absolute while remaining incapable of trust. They may master ritual while protecting the heart. They may discipline appetite while remaining unable to receive love. Devotion enters precisely this region. Its claim is that the heart is not merely an obstacle to realization or an immature faculty to be surpassed. Properly transformed, it can become a way of knowing. Love reveals dimensions that detached observation cannot disclose. One may know many facts about another person and still not know them as someone loved. Relationship discloses presence, particularity, vulnerability, and value in a way classification cannot replace. Love also knows through particularity. Detached thought seeks what can be generalized. Devotion is often seized by what cannot be exchanged. This name, this face, this gesture, this history, this form of presence. The beloved is not loved as an instance of a category. The relation becomes concrete, and through that concreteness, the sacred acquires emotional and existential reality. This particularity cannot be reduced to psychological comfort. It may console, but it can also wound, demand, unsettle, and strip away familiar identities. The devotee does not merely use a sacred image to regulate emotion. At its strongest, the image becomes a center before which the person's existing emotional world is judged and transformed. Devotional knowledge begins where the sacred ceases to be only an object of thought and becomes someone or a presence to whom the whole person is answerable. The devotional mind extends this intuition toward the sacred. It does not ask only what is ultimate reality. It asks, how can I draw near? How can I remember? How can I serve? How can I offer what I am? How can separation be endured? How can the whole of life become a response? This does not mean devotion rejects knowledge. Devotional traditions may produce sophisticated theology, philosophy, ritual systems, aesthetics, and spiritual psychology, but these remain ordered toward relationship. Knowledge clarifies the nature of the beloved. Ritual gives love a body. Ethics purifies the capacity to serve. Remembrance protects the relationship from distraction. Renunciation removes what obstructs fidelity. The decisive question is not only whether a proposition is true, but whether the person has entered living relation with the truth it names. For the devotional mind, a perfectly correct doctrine without love may remain spiritually incomplete. The person may know what the beloved is supposed to be while remaining untouched by the beloved. This is why devotion cannot be dismissed as a lower or easier path. Its external forms may be simple, its inner demand is not. To sing is easy. To love without possessing is difficult. To bow is easy. To surrender without becoming passive or infantile is difficult. To speak of trust is easy. To remain faithful through silence, disappointment, and the collapse of consolation is difficult. To call oneself a servant is easy. To serve without needing recognition, control, or spiritual status is difficult. To feel longing is easy. To distinguish sacred longing from loneliness, erotic projection, abandonment, fear, and addiction to emotional intensity is difficult. The language of mature love and the language of wounded attachment can sound almost identical. Both may say, I need you, I belong to you, do not abandon me, take my whole life, only you can save me. The difference cannot be established by intensity, it must be discovered through transformation. Does love make the person freer from possession or more dependent upon reassurance? Does surrender deepen responsibility or remove agency? Does remembrance open the heart to life or enclose it within devotional stimulation? Does service reduce self-importance or create a sacred identity around being indispensable? Does the relationship survive when sweetness disappears? Does devotion allow truth to correct it, or must every fact be subordinated to the preservation of faith? These difficulties do not diminish the dignity of the path. They reveal what the path actually asks. For the right temperament, devotion can organize an entire life. Hearing, prayer, remembrance, worship, service, friendship, surrender, sacred narrative, community, and ritual can gather almost every faculty around one relational center. A person may mature profoundly within this world without becoming a philosopher, visionary, architect, or transgressive adept. Yet, completeness as a path does not establish supremacy as a universal map. The devotional heart naturally experiences the beloved as incomparable. Love does not approach its object neutrally. For the lover, the beloved is not one interchangeable value among others. This inner absoluteness is part of devotion's beauty, but it must not become the claim that every other path or encounter with the sacred is objectively lower. The heart may belong wholly to one beloved without becoming a tribunal before which all other spiritual lives must be ranked. Devotion requires wholeheartedness. It does not require metaphysical contempt. Its central intuition can therefore be stated simply: ultimate reality can be encountered through sacred relationship, and the whole emotional, sensory, and practical life can be gathered into love, remembrance, service, and self-offering. But the deeper demand follows immediately. The purpose of devotion is not merely to redirect ordinary attachment toward the sacred, it is to transform the structure through which the person loves. What the devotional relational mode is not. The devotional relational mode is easily confused with other forms of spiritual life because its language is familiar and its expressions are widely shared. A person may sing, pray, bow, weep, worship a deity, obey a teacher, experience visions, serve others, or speak constantly about surrender without being primarily devotional. The decisive question is not which religious actions appear, it is what organizes them. Devotion begins when sacred relationship becomes the central grammar of spiritual life. The person increasingly experiences life as remembrance, response, offering, nearness, distance, trust, and fidelity toward the beloved. Its defining movement is not emotion alone, but transformation through relation. It is not emotional intensity. Tears, trembling, singing, dancing, longing, joy, grief, and absorption may accompany genuine devotion, but intensity does not establish either the nature or maturity of the experience. Similar states may arise through music, repetition, collective movement, exhaustion, aesthetic beauty, emotional contagion, romantic projection, unmet attachment needs, or psychological instability. The experience may still be meaningful and may open a real devotional possibility, but the state itself proves little. Emotion rises and falls. Devotion concerns what the relationship gradually makes of the person. A quiet devotee may possess greater fidelity than someone who continually displays exaltation. A person may cry during worship and remain possessive, manipulative, unstable, or indifferent in ordinary life. Another may feel little sweetness, yet continue to remember, serve, act truthfully, and remain inwardly faithful. Devotion can contain intense feeling. It cannot be defined by intensity. The crucial question is not, how strongly did I feel, but what has this love transformed? It is not attachment or dependency. Devotion and attachment may speak almost identical languages. Both may say, I need you, do not leave me, I belong to you, or only you can save me. Yet the underlying movement may be very different. Attachment seeks security, reassurance, possession, protection, and confirmation of specialness. Devotion may begin within the same emotional structure. Human beings do not enter sacred relationship without histories of dependence, fear, and unmet need. Mixture does not invalidate the path, but mature devotion gradually transforms attachment. It makes the person less possessive, more able to tolerate silence, more truthful about need, less dependent upon constant reassurance, and more capable of adult responsibility. Dependency asks the beloved to preserve the self. Devotion gradually offers the self without requiring the relationship to protect every identity built around it. Without this transformation, ordinary attachment continues under sacred names. The person may love not the beloved, but the feeling of being protected, chosen, forgiven, or spiritually exceptional. It is not belief in a personal God. A person may firmly believe that God is personal without being devotional. They may defend divine personhood philosophically, accept it as doctrine, and participate in worship while remaining existentially distant. Devotion is not established by the proposition that the absolute possesses personality. It begins when the sacred becomes addressable and the person begins to live responsively within that relation. One may affirm God is a person without ever inwardly saying, you. Conversely, a person may experience a profound relational orientation toward sacred presence while remaining uncertain how literally divine personhood should be described. Theology gives relationship language and form. Theology about relationship is not yet relationship. It is not ritual worship. Devotion and ritual frequently support one another. The devotee offers food, lights lamps, bows, chants, visits sacred places, observes festivals, and serves a consecrated image. Ritual gives affection a body and protects remembrance from dependence upon mood. Yet the ritual mind asks what form has been transmitted, what sequence makes the sacred present, and what conditions make the act valid. The devotional mind asks how the act can express love, remembrance, service, or nearness. The same offering may therefore arise from different modes. For the ritualist, precision may remain central even when emotion is absent. For the devotee, a simple offering may feel complete if the relationship is alive. This does not make devotion superior. Devotional spontaneity can become careless, while ritual discipline can preserve depth beyond temporary feeling. Ritual enacts sacred order. Devotion enters sacred relationship. It is not visionary experience. Devotion may contain dreams, darshana, felt presence, voices, symbolic encounters, or spontaneous images of the deity. But the devotional mind is organized around relationship, while the visionary mind is organized around reception. The devotee asks, how can I remain near? What does this meeting ask of my love? The visionary asks, what is appearing? What is being communicated? How should it be interpreted? One event may contain both modes. A deity may appear, be loved, and communicate something. The distinction lies in what becomes central. When visions disappear, devotion can continue through remembrance, service, prayer, and fidelity. A visionary path is more directly deprived when the channel of reception closes. The devotee is tested by the absence of felt presence, the visionary by the absence of communication. Their distortions also differ. The devotional shadow seeks to remain loved or chosen. The visionary shadow seeks special access or authority. When combined, they can become strongly self-sealing. The need to feel uniquely loved shapes a vision of being chosen, while the vision appears to prove the special relationship. It is not obedience. Devotion often contains obedience. Love may express itself through discipline, fidelity, and willingness to subordinate immediate desire, but obedience alone is not devotion. A person may obey through fear, dependence, institutional pressure, habit, admiration, or desire for approval. The outer action resembles surrender, while the inner relationship remains governed by anxiety. This becomes especially dangerous around teachers and institutions. Submission to a guru, priest, lineage, or community is not automatically surrender to God. Human authority may represent the sacred, but it does not become identical with the sacred merely because devotional language is used. Mature devotion does not require the destruction of discrimination. Love may trust, it must also remain capable of seeing. Obedience becomes devotional only when it serves a living relation without abolishing conscience, responsibility, or the capacity to recognize harm. Otherwise, surrender becomes a sacred justification for domination. It is not infantilism. The devotional language of childhood can express a genuine truth. The person may discover that existence is received, grace cannot be manufactured, and one can be held in weakness, grief, illness, or failure. The image of the kitten carried in its mother's mouth preserves this receptive dimension. But spiritual childhood is not permanent psychological underdevelopment. I am small before the divine does not mean I cannot decide, I should not think, or someone else must take responsibility for my life. The image of the young monkey clinging to its mother preserves agency, effort, discipline, and response. The kitten without the monkey becomes sacralized helplessness. The monkey without the kitten becomes anxious self-salvation. Devotion does not abolish adulthood. It allows adulthood to exist without the fantasy of complete self-sufficiency. It is not compassionate service. Devotion may produce extraordinary service. The person feeds others, gives money, maintains sacred spaces, teaches, protects, and offers labor because beings are seen as belonging to the beloved. But service may arise from several modes. The compassionate liberative mind asks what this being needs and what will reduce harm. The devotional mind may ask how the beloved can be served through this person. The actions may be identical, but the inner organization differs. Devotional service can overcome self-absorption, yet it can also remain selective. Intense care for those within the sacred world and indifference toward those outside it. Devotion gives service intimacy and offering. Compassion asks whether the suffering person remains visible in their own right. It is not romantic love, redirected toward God. Devotional literature often uses the language of lover and beloved because human eros possesses intensity, vulnerability, longing, exclusivity, and the power to reorganize attention. But sacred love is not created merely by replacing the human object with a divine one. Ordinary romantic structures can continue almost unchanged. The need to be chosen, fantasy of perfect union, jealousy, fear of abandonment, idealization, desire to be uniquely desired, and hope that one absolute relationship will resolve every human wound. The divine relationship may then become a stage on which unrecognized human longing performs itself in exalted form. This does not reduce devotional eros to sexuality or romance. It means resemblance is not transformation. Mature devotion does not merely redirect longing, it changes its quality. The beloved is no longer required to complete the person's fantasy, guarantee specialness, or protect them from the uncertainty of human life. Yet this transformation should not be described as if devotional eros were merely a pathology that has finally become regulated. Its mature form may remain excessive, poetic, even overwhelming. It may contain adoration that exceeds utility, longing that cannot be translated into ordinary attachment language, and a joy in praise that asks for no psychological explanation. The point is not to make devotion emotionally moderate, it is to make its intensity truthful. The goal is not to reduce sacred eros to secure attachment. It is to free eros from possession, deception, and the demand that the beloved complete the lover's unfinished fantasy. It is not addiction to sweetness or suffering. Devotion can produce sweetness, joy in the name, tenderness before the sacred form, tears in prayer, warmth in community, and intimate presence. These states can nourish the path, but the desire to feel devotional is not devotion. A person may become dependent upon music, festivals, charismatic teachers, collective emotion, and repeated consolation. When sweetness disappears, they may feel the relationship itself has vanished. The opposite state can become equally addictive. Sacred literature often honors longing and separation, yet authentic viraha presupposes a relation that has become inwardly real. Viraha is not sadness produced to imitate advanced devotion, it is the wound left by presence. When suffering becomes proof of love, the person may preserve the identity of the abandoned lover because peace feels spiritually inferior. Addiction to sweetness and addiction to desolation appear opposite, but both require emotional stimulation. Mature devotion can receive sweetness without possessing it, and endure dryness without manufacturing despair. It is not sectarian supremacy. The devotional heart naturally experiences the beloved as incomparable. For the lover, the beloved is not one interchangeable value among others. This inner absoluteness belongs to love. But intimate incomparability is not a universal hierarchy. For me, nothing surpasses the beloved does not logically become every other deity, path, realization, and mode of spiritual consciousness is objectively lower. The first expresses fidelity, the second transforms fidelity into a tribunal. Devotional traditions may support supremacy through scripture, lineage, revelation, or theology. Such claims can strengthen commitment, but they may also train the devotee to experience degradation of alternatives as proof of loyalty. Devotion can be complete as a path without becoming complete as a map of all paths. The distinctive movement. The devotional relational mode may include emotion, doctrine, ritual, vision, obedience, service, dependence, and longing. None defines it alone. Its unique movement is the gathering and transformation of life through sacred relationship. The person hears not merely to acquire knowledge, but to remember, speaks not merely to express emotion, but to address and praise, serves not merely to perform duty, but to offer, waits because absence still belongs to relation, surrenders not to become passive, but to release possessiveness while remaining capable of response. The mature devotional question is therefore not, how intensely do I feel? How completely do I obey? Or how certain am I that my beloved is highest? It is, what has this relationship made of my capacity to love, trust, serve, grieve, choose, and remain truthful? Devotion matures when sacred relationship no longer merely repeats the person's existing emotional structure, but gradually transforms the structure through which they enter every relationship. The world from within. From within the devotional relational mind, reality is not fundamentally impersonal. The world may contain law, causality, matter, consciousness, emptiness, suffering, and historical accident. Yet beneath or within these, the devotee senses relation. Life is not merely happening, it is being received from someone, lived before someone, remembered by someone, or offered back to someone. The sacred is encountered as a presence capable of being addressed. The beloved may be Krishna, Rama, Shiva, the goddess, Christ, Allah, the Divine Mother, the indwelling Lord, the Guru as a transparent representative of the sacred, or a reality whose personhood cannot be defined philosophically but is nevertheless experienced relationally. What matters is not simply belief in a personal deity. The center of spiritual life becomes a living thou. The devotional mind does not ask only what is real, it asks, who is calling me? Who has given this? Who is present here? How can I respond? How can I remain near? This relational grammar reorganizes experience. Joy becomes grace. Beauty becomes a trace of the beloved. Work can become service. Food becomes offering. And gift, memory, becomes remembrance. Speech becomes praise. Silence becomes waiting. Death may be imagined not only as dissolution or release, but as return, meeting, or reunion. This gives devotional life extraordinary coherence. The relationship can enter nearly any situation without requiring a specialized setting. The devotee may remember while walking, working, cooking, grieving, caring for a child, enduring illness, or waiting in uncertainty. A temple, church, mosque, shrine, image, sacred text, song, or name intensifies the relation, but the relation need not remain confined there. The entire world can become a field of address. The devotional person may feel that events are not fully understood until their relational meaning is known. A philosopher may ask what suffering reveals about reality. An ascetic may ask what attachment it exposes. A contemplative may investigate the one claiming the pain. The devotee asks, what is happening between the beloved and me through this? This question can produce trust, meaning, and endurance. It can also become dangerous when asked too quickly. From within devotion, however, relationship is not merely an interpretation added afterward. It is the dimension through which the event becomes spiritually alive. The primacy of remembrance. One of the deepest devotional concerns is forgetfulness. The central danger is not always doctrinal error, ritual impurity, or metaphysical ignorance. It is that the heart wanders from the beloved and becomes absorbed in lesser objects. The devotee therefore seeks remembrance through name, story, image, prayer, song, ritual, and offering. Remembrance is more than recalling information. One may remember facts about a person without inwardly returning to them. Devotional remembrance restores the relationship to the center of attention. The sacred name is especially powerful because it can travel with the person. It can be repeated in joy or fear, concentration or exhaustion. The mind may wander, but the name calls it back. The heart may become dry, but remembrance continues. The world may become chaotic, but one sound preserves orientation. For the devotional mind, repetition need not be mechanical. It resembles returning again and again to someone loved, not because they have been forgotten intellectually, but because relationship requires renewed presence. Sacred stories matter for the same reason. Narrative gives love a world. The devotee does not relate only to an abstract divine quality. The beloved acts, speaks, plays, suffers, protects, withdraws, forgives, and enters relationships. Story gives particularity to the relation, form, gesture, name, place, and remembered event. The theological mind may ask whether every story is historically or metaphysically literal. The devotional mind first asks what kind of relationship the story makes possible. The need for nearness. The devotional mind seeks proximity, physical, emotional, imaginative, ritual, contemplative, or symbolic. The devotee visits sacred places, keeps images, repeats names, reads stories, associates with others who love the same beloved, and structures daily life around recollection. Nearness does not always mean sweetness. It may appear as awe, reverence, obedience, dependence, or a sense of being seen, but even distance is relational distance. The devotee is not merely separated from an abstract state, they feel far from someone. This is why absence becomes so powerful. When felt presence recedes, prayer becomes dry, the name no longer opens the heart, and the world loses color. The person asks, why have you hidden? Are you still here? How can I return? The devotional world therefore contains presence and absence, sweetness and dryness, meeting and longing. Presence invites gratitude, absence tests remembrance. Sweetness opens the heart. Dryness asks whether love can remain without immediate consolation. For devotion, even absence may remain a form of relation, but only if absence is not forced to mean more than it does. The beloved as witness. The devotional person often lives with the sense of being seen. This can be consoling. Suffering, effort, humiliation, private prayer, and unnoticed acts of service are held within a gaze larger than public recognition. The world may misunderstand, but the beloved knows. An act need not receive applause if it is offered. Being seen also carries moral force. The devotee may feel unable to divide spiritual life from ordinary conduct because every action occurs before the beloved. Ethics becomes relational rather than merely legal. One avoids harm not only because it violates a rule, but because it wounds the relationship or dishonors the one loved. Repentance becomes the desire to restore honesty and nearness. At its best, this gaze creates integrity. The person is invited to become inwardly the same as they appear in prayer. No part of life is completely private from love. Its distortion, however, is divine surveillance, fear, obsessive guilt, and dependence upon imagined approval. The mature sense of being seen does not turn the beloved into an internal persecutor. The language of gift. Devotion tends to experience existence as received. Body, breath, food, ability, beauty, relationship, and the opportunity to practice may all be interpreted as gifts. Gratitude becomes recognition that life is not self-generated possession. This produces the movement of offering. What has been received is returned. Food is offered before it is eaten. Work is dedicated. Song is sung. Time is given. Skill becomes service. Suffering may also be offered, not because suffering is good, but because nothing must remain spiritually unusable. The central movement is reciprocal. I have received from you. Let this return to you. At its best, this loosens possessiveness. The person no longer treats everything primarily as material for private satisfaction or status. Ordinary life acquires a sacramental quality because it can become response. Yet reciprocity also reveals the hidden bargain. I have offered, therefore protect me. I have served, therefore remember me. I have surrendered, therefore do not let this happen. Devotion eventually asks whether the offering was a gift or a contract whose terms remained unspoken. Relationship through many forms. The devotional world is not organized around one emotional posture. The sacred may be approached through reverence, servitude, friendship, parental affection, romantic love, trust, dependence, gratitude, or complete self-offering. These forms are not merely decorative metaphors. They organize attention, emotion, imagination, conduct, and identity. The servant asks how to obey and serve faithfully. The friend seeks intimacy and confidence. The parent feeds, dresses, and cares for the divine child. The lover longs for complete nearness. The surrendered soul seeks to place action and outcome in divine hands. The relation chosen, or the relation that seems to choose the devotee, shapes the whole path. This multiplicity allows devotion to engage a wide emotional range, but it also means that each form carries its own psychological dangers. Servitude can become subservience. Friendship can become presumption. Parental love can conceal control. Bridal love can absorb erotic projection. Surrender can become passivity. Devotion is not one emotion. It is a family of relational psychologies gathered around the sacred. Grace and response. Devotional traditions often wrestle with the relation between grace and effort. One image is the kitten carried in the mother cat's mouth. It does not secure itself through strength. It is held. Another is the baby monkey clinging to its mother. It must grasp and participate in its own safety. The kitten preserves the truth that grace is not manufactured by achievement. One may be weak, confused, exhausted, or incapable and still be carried. The monkey preserves the truth that relationship requires response. The devotee must remember, practice, choose, serve, restrain distraction, and remain faithful. A mature devotional world needs room for both. Grace does not abolish agency. Agency does not create grace. The rhythm of devotion is receptivity and response. I did not create the ground that holds me, but because I am held, I can answer. The role of community. Devotion is often strengthened through shared emotional and symbolic life. People sing together, hear sacred narratives, celebrate festivals, honor the same figures, and use the same language of grace, longing, and surrender. Community gives private devotion a body. It sustains remembrance when individual feeling weakens. One person's faith may fail while another carries the song. One generation preserves forms, the next could not invent alone. This can produce unusual warmth, solidarity, generosity, and belonging. A person who felt emotionally homeless may enter a world where tenderness, tears, gratitude, and longing are honored rather than embarrassing. Because the community carries not only doctrine but the devotee's emotional world, belonging can also become difficult to question. Criticism of doctrine may feel like criticism of love. Leaving the institution may feel like abandoning the beloved. Disagreement may be experienced as betrayal. Devotional community can carry the heart. It can also become the structure through which the heart is held captive. At its best, community also teaches the devotee that love is larger than private feeling. The song continues when one voice is silent. Ritual preserves fidelity when emotion weakens. Service prevents devotion from becoming a private interior drama. Elders, texts, festivals, and shared memory place the individual relation within a history that neither began nor ends with one person. This communal dimension corrects spiritual narcissism, but only when belonging does not become ownership. The community must carry the relationship without claiming exclusive control over the beloved. The characteristic questions. The devotional relational mind repeatedly returns to a distinctive set of questions. How can I remember you? How can I remain near? What can I offer? What prevents me from loving fully? Why have you become silent? Can I remain faithful without consolation? Am I serving you or only seeking reassurance? Can I receive grace without refusing responsibility? Can I love you completely without diminishing the paths of others? These questions reveal both the dignity and difficulty of the mode. Relationship exposes the person more deeply than belief alone. Love brings dependence, fear, possessiveness, gratitude, resentment, and the wish to be chosen into the sacred field. The beloved becomes refuge and mirror at once. The relation consoles the person, but also reveals what remains hidden inside their way of loving. How the devotional mind judges maturity. The devotional mind does not usually measure maturity first through intellectual complexity, visionary power, ritual status, or metaphysical attainment. It looks for the quality of relationship. Does the person remember? Are they humble? Do they serve? Has the heart softened? Can they receive grace? Do they remain faithful through difficulty? Has self-centeredness weakened? The mature devotee may appear simple while possessing considerable depth. Their knowledge may be relational rather than systematic. Conversely, someone may know devotional theology perfectly while remaining harsh, competitive, manipulative, or emotionally untouched. From within devotion, this is not a minor inconsistency. It is failure to know the beloved in the mode that matters. The ultimate criterion is not how much one can say about love, it is what love has made of the person. The world from within devotion is therefore not merely sweet, it is intimate. Everything may become address, remembrance, gift, offering, response, presence, or absence. The universe becomes less like an object to be understood and more like a relationship one is already inside. The central devotional question is not simply, does the beloved exist? It is, how shall I live now that my life is experienced as taking place within this relationship? The central operation and mature fruit. The central operation of the devotional relational mind is the gathering of the person around the beloved. Ordinary emotional life is scattered. Attention moves between fear, desire, approval, resentment, ambition, loneliness, memory, pleasure, grief, and the need to be recognized. Different relationships claim different parts of the person. Love may be divided from duty, tenderness from strength, and spiritual aspiration from ordinary life. Devotion attempts to bring this field into relation with one sacred center. The person hears in order to remember, speaks in order to praise, acts in order to serve, receives in order to give thanks, and offers work, food, skill, suffering, desire, failure, and hope. This does not make every emotion pure merely because it is directed toward God. Devotion begins with the emotional structure that actually exists. Attachment, fear, longing, gratitude, possessiveness, shame, dependence, and the need to be chosen all enter the relationship. The work of devotion is not to intensify these feelings, but to transform their quality. From scattered attention to remembrance. The first operation is recollection. The heart is repeatedly drawn back from dispersion through name, image, story, prayer, song, worship, and service. Remembrance gradually becomes more than one practice among others. It begins to reorganize perception. Beauty evokes gratitude. Difficulty evokes prayer. Work becomes offering. Success becomes received rather than privately possessed. Failure is brought honestly into the relationship. The sacred name arises in fear, exhaustion, wonder, or grief. At maturity, remembrance is not compulsive repetition or refusal to attend to the world. It is the capacity to remain inwardly related while acting fully within life. The beloved does not replace reality. The relationship gives reality a center. From possession to offering. The ordinary self approaches life through ownership. My body, my achievement, my time, my knowledge, my relationship, my suffering, my spiritual progress. Devotion introduces another movement. This has been received, let it be offered. Offering does not require negligence or rejection of use. Food is offered and eaten. Work is dedicated and completed. Skill becomes service and still requires discipline. The body is treated as received and therefore cared for rather than despised. The mature devotee loosens the fantasy of absolute ownership. What is given may be loved, protected, and enjoyed without being treated as self-created entitlement. But offering must eventually become free from bargaining. At first, the hidden contract may be, I give myself, therefore protect me. I serve, therefore remember me. I surrender, therefore let life unfold according to the meaning I expect. Mature devotion begins when offering survives the collapse of this contract. From demand to response. Ordinary attachment asks what the relationship will provide: safety, protection, recognition, relief from abandonment. Devotion may begin through these needs. Sacred relationship often first opens where the person is wounded or helpless, but the movement gradually changes from demand to response. The devotee begins to ask, what has already been given? What does this relation ask of me? How can I answer? What would love look like here? Response is not passive submission. It includes discernment, choice, effort, and responsibility. The kitten preserves receptivity, the monkey preserves participation. I do not create the grace that carries me, but I am responsible for how I answer being carried. From emotional stimulation to fidelity. Devotion frequently begins with sweetness. The name opens the heart. Music brings tears. The sacred form feels alive. Community creates warmth. These experiences may awaken capacities closed for years. But if love survives only while the person feels devotional, the relationship remains dependent upon stimulation. The mature fruit is fidelity. Remembrance, honesty, service, and offering continue through changing states. The devotee can receive sweetness without demanding its continuation, endure dryness without manufacturing despair, and remain related when prayer feels empty, community disappoints, or certainty weakens. This does not make devotion cold. Feeling remains powerful, but it is no longer the proof that love exists. Emotion gives devotion intensity, fidelity gives it duration. From fear of abandonment to trust. Devotion brings the deepest relational fears into sacred space. Will I be abandoned? Have I been forgotten? Why has the beloved become silent? Mature trust is not certainty that nothing painful will occur, nor the belief that every event is benevolent intervention. It is the capacity to remain open without complete control over the relation. The devotee may not understand what is happening, feel protected, or receive the expected answer, yet the relationship does not immediately collapse into panic or accusation. This trust cannot be produced by repeating that everything is grace. It must survive real disappointment. At its height, trust is not confidence that the beloved will preserve the devotee's preferred life. It is confidence that love need not disappear when the expected form of protection fails. From self-erasure to surrender. Devotion often speaks of giving up the self, but surrender is easily confused with passivity, helplessness, or destruction of judgment. Mature surrender does not mean the person ceases to choose, think, act, or protect boundaries. It means these capacities are no longer organized solely around self-preservation, control, and possession. The person may still say no, leave an unhealthy institution, question a teacher, defend another person, and make decisions without certainty. Surrender does not abolish agency, it purifies what agency serves. The surrendered person does not become less adult, they become less compelled to make themselves the absolute center of every action and outcome. Genuine surrender may therefore increase responsibility. One can no longer hide behind God will decide, the guru knows, or I am only an instrument. If action belongs to the relationship, truthfulness and discernment become offerings as well. From service to love without self importance. Service gives devotion a body. The person gives time, labor, money, attention, and skill. Love leaves the private interior and becomes action, but service can become identity. The person may need to be indispensable, praised for sacrifice, close to authority, or recognized as more surrendered than others. Mature service becomes quieter. The person can help without controlling, give without creating debt, serve without erasing limits, rest without believing love has ceased, and allow another person to refuse the offered help. The mature devotee does not serve to prove worthiness of love. They serve because love seeks expression. From idealization to truthful love. Devotion often begins through idealization. The beloved is perfect, beautiful, protective, and free from human limitation. This may open the heart. But idealization often extends to teachers, institutions, sacred histories, and community. Their imperfections become difficult to acknowledge because they seem to threaten the relationship itself. Mature devotion becomes capable of truth. It does not require weak evidence to prove the beloved supreme. It does not protect a teacher's wrongdoing because the teacher represents God. It does not deny historical complexity because identity depends upon an unbroken, idealized narrative. It can lose an apologetic argument without losing love. It can discover limitation in an institution without concluding that every sacred encounter within it was false. One of devotion's highest fruits is that the relationship becomes strong enough to survive reality. The transformation of the emotional field. Devotion's mature fruit is not the elimination of emotion, but its education. Fear can become trust without denying danger. Grief can become prayer without being romanticized. Joy can become gratitude without possessiveness. Desire can become offering without pretending desire has vanished. Dependence can become receptivity without helplessness. Longing can deepen love without becoming addiction to absence. Guilt can become repentance without self hatred. Tenderness can coexist with boundaries. The person becomes capable of feeling deeply without being ruled by every feeling. The heart is not merely excited, it is educated. But education is not domestication. Mature devotion is not simply calm, psychologically secure affection with sacred vocabulary. It may retain rapture, tears, longing, poetry, and the shock of being overtaken. What changes is not necessarily the magnitude of feeling, but its relation to truth, responsibility, and freedom. The mature devotee can be carried beyond ordinary proportion without making intensity a certificate of attainment. They can praise without turning praise into self display, surrender without theatrical self erasure, and adore without asking adoration to justify every belief. Bhakti retains an irreducible excess. Love may overflow explanation, usefulness, and psychological balance. Maturity does not extinguish that excess. It prevents the lover from using it as exemption from reality. Mature devotional knowledge. Devotion also produces a distinctive knowledge. Its deepest knowing is participatory. One knows the beloved through sustained address, trust, memory, service, and response. As in human intimacy, accurate information does not exhaust relational knowledge. Love discloses particularity, value, presence, and meaning inaccessible to detached observation alone. This knowledge has danger because intimacy can become projection. Feeling close does not guarantee accurate perception. Mature devotional knowledge therefore remains humble. It does not say, I have contained the beloved in my understanding. It says, I have been changed through relation, and therefore I know something that distance alone could not disclose. The mature fruit. The mature fruit of the devotional relational mode is a person whose whole life has become more capable of love. They are not necessarily emotionally dramatic. Their devotion may be visible in gratitude, fidelity, responsibility, tenderness, courage, remembrance, and the ability to offer without possessing. They can be carried without becoming permanently infantile. They can act without believing they create grace, serve without needing to become indispensable, endure absence without cultivating despair, receive sweetness without addiction, love one form of the sacred completely without diminishing every other path. Preserve devotion when teachers, institutions, and apologetic certainties reveal their limitations. Above all, they become more capable of human relationship rather than less, more truthful about need, more respectful of freedom, and more able to remain present when love is not immediately rewarding. The devotional path reaches maturity when the beloved is no longer used to protect the person from life, but becomes the center from which life can be entered more fully. Its mature movement can therefore be stated simply: devotion gathers the scattered heart around the beloved, then transforms attachment into trust, possession into offering, intensity into fidelity, helplessness into receptive agency, and love's demand to be completed into love's capacity to respond. Distortion and self-sealing. The distortion of the devotional relational mode begins when sacred relationship stops transforming attachment and begins protecting it. Devotion can gather longing, fear, tenderness, dependence, gratitude, shame, hope, grief, desire, and the need to belong around one center, but the same completeness makes it unusually difficult to examine from outside. Sweetness becomes grace, dryness becomes purification, presence becomes communion, absence becomes separation, answered prayer confirms care, unanswered prayer deepens surrender, success becomes mercy, failure becomes instruction, suffering becomes offering. None of these interpretations is necessarily false. The danger begins when no other interpretation is allowed. The devotional world then becomes self-sealing. Whatever happens confirms the relationship, doctrine, authority, or path. Psychological need, institutional failure, emotional instability, and ordinary disappointment can no longer appear in their own names. They must be translated into grace, testing, surrender, or divine arrangement. The relationship ceases to reveal the person. It begins protecting the devotional identity from revelation. Attachment disguised as surrender. The first distortion is the sanctification of dependency. The devotee may say, "I cannot live without you. I know nothing," or "do with me whatever you wish." These words may express real surrender. They may also express fear of abandonment, inability to tolerate uncertainty, dependence upon authority, or longing for a perfect protector. Attachment asks the beloved, guru, or community to provide identity, emotional regulation, direction, protection, and freedom from adulthood. The person appears surrendered because they relinquish agency, but what has actually been surrendered may be responsibility rather than self-centeredness. They avoid decisions because choosing creates the possibility of error. They avoid disagreement because conflict threatens belonging. They avoid boundaries because refusal feels like betrayal. Helplessness becomes humility, dependence becomes faith. This is the kitten without the monkey. Grace becomes an argument against development. Mature surrender loosens possessiveness while preserving conscience and responsibility. Counterfeit surrender gives those capacities away and calls the resulting helplessness holiness, the need to be chosen. Devotion often awakens through feeling personally addressed, seen, forgiven, or drawn. This can heal profound loneliness, but the experience of being chosen can become addictive. The devotee seeks evidence of special nearness, the teacher's attention, confidential service, dreams, signs, spiritual rank, or imagined participation in an inner circle. The personality may appear humble while being organized around exceptional status. "I am the most fallen" may secretly mean "my fallenness makes me the most dramatically rescued." "I am only a servant" may require recognition as the most faithful servant. Unworthiness itself becomes a way of remaining central. This is devotional narcissism. The self survives as the uniquely surrendered, uniquely broken, uniquely loved, or uniquely chosen devotee. Humility becomes a refined form of self-importance. Competitive intimacy. Once devotion is organized socially, intimacy can become hierarchy. Who is closest to the teacher? Who understands the highest rasa? Who cries most in worship? Who has sacrificed most? Who receives signs of favor? Communities may deny that such competition exists while reinforcing it through access, titles, stories, praise, and informal status. Love becomes rank. Jealousy is spiritualized as zeal. Possessiveness becomes exclusive devotion. Suspicion of outsiders becomes loyalty. A mature devotional community allows affection without converting intimacy into status. A distorted one distributes spiritual worth according to visibility, emotional display, proximity to authority, or conformity to the expected form of love. It's addiction to sweetness and separation. Devotion can create powerful warmth, beauty, and consolation. The name opens the heart. Collective singing dissolves isolation. The sacred image feels alive. But the devotee may become attached not to the beloved, but to the devotional state. They move from festival to festival, teacher to teacher, song to song, seeking the return of the original opening. Ordinary work feels dead. Quiet prayer feels empty. The beloved becomes a provider of states. Love becomes stimulation. The opposite state can be equally intoxicating. Traditions honor longing and separation, but the devotee may cultivate sadness because tears signify depth. They become attached to the identity of the abandoned lover. Relief feels suspicious. Emotional stability seems spiritually inferior. Sweetness and desolation become the same addiction when both are needed as proof that the relationship exists. Mature devotion receives sweetness as gift and allows it to pass. It honors grief without needing pain to remain spiritually significant. Projection of human longing. Devotion works with the same emotional material through which human beings seek parents, partners, erotic fulfillment, recognition, and rescue. This gives it transformative power and enormous room for projection. A person may seek a divine mother because human care was absent, surrender to a guru because reciprocal adult intimacy feels difficult, or direct romantic longing toward the deity because ordinary desire feels shameful or unavailable. None of this automatically makes devotion false. Human beings approach the sacred through the structures they possess. The problem begins when devotional interpretation prevents recognition of the underlying need. The person says, I desire only the beloved, while remaining unable to acknowledge loneliness, sexuality, jealousy, anger, or hunger for human closeness. Sacred language then becomes dissociation. The object changes, the structure of desire does not. When the devotional structure collapses, the unmet material may return through chaotic relationships, compulsive behavior, resentment, or rejection of the whole path. The Guru as substitute beloved. A teacher may embody the tradition, transmit practice, interpret scripture, and make sacred relation tangible, but mediation can become substitution. The devotee transfers to the teacher the trust, dependence, longing, and absolute loyalty meant for the divine. The teacher becomes the one who sees everything, decides everything, forgives everything, and assigns meaning to every event. Questioning the guru feels like questioning God. Leaving the teacher feels like leaving the path. Recognizing wrongdoing feels like destroying the sacred relation itself. This is especially dangerous because human authority can reward obedience, withdraw affection, grant status, and interpret resistance. A distorted system collapses the distinction between representation and identity, guidance and control, surrender to the sacred, and submission to a person. A teacher may open a door. They must not become the owner of the sacred world behind it. Acul love as suspension of judgment. Devotion rightly challenges sterile criticism. One can analyze love indefinitely and never love, but this truth can be turned against discernment. Questions become lack of faith. Historical evidence becomes contamination. Ethical concern becomes offense. Doubt becomes pride. A weak scriptural argument must be defended because the beloved's supremacy seems to depend upon it. A teacher's cruelty must be reinterpreted because divine representation cannot fail. Love no longer seeks truth. It requires protection from truth. The path that began through vulnerability becomes unable to remain vulnerable to evidence. This is one of devotion's deepest reversals. Sectarian supremacy. The heart's experience of the beloved as incomparable is not itself a distortion, but theology may convert inward testimony into external hierarchy. This deity is highest. This revelation is final. This rasa surpasses all others. This lineage alone carries the fullest grace. Repeated often enough, such claims become the atmosphere of devotion rather than arguments. The practitioner learns that praising the beloved requires ranking others below the beloved. Exclusive fidelity becomes comparative degradation. Sometimes the most insistent supremacy conceals the least secure love. The hierarchy supplies identity where relationship remains thin. For me, nothing surpasses the beloved is testimony. Nothing can surpass my beloved for anyone is metaphysical conquest. Emotional contagion mistaken for realization. Devotional communities create shared states through music, rhythm, repetition, group movement, expectation, fatigue, and charismatic leadership. These states can be beautiful and transformative. but they may also be mistaken for realization. A person cries because others cry, interprets bodily activation through the community's vocabulary, and names temporary release from isolation pure devotion. The group confirms the experience confirms the group. The state may be genuine as a state. Its interpretation may still be exaggerated. Temporary exaltation can coexist with cruelty, poor judgment, manipulation, or dependence. Emotional intensity cannot validate the path, teacher, doctrine, and community all at once. Suffering as divine arrangement. Because devotion experiences life relationally, suffering may be interpreted as instruction, purification, concealment, or grace. This can help a person endure what appears meaningless. It can also weaken moral perception. Abuse becomes severe mercy. Neglect becomes a test of surrender. Humiliation becomes purification. Exploitation becomes service. A violated boundary becomes proof that the devotee still has ego. The question, "What is this teaching me?" replaces the prior questions. Who is causing harm? What must stop? Who needs protection? Both levels may eventually matter. Their order matters. The language of divine arrangement must never remove responsibility from human actors. Not every wound is a sacred message. Sometimes someone behaved cruelly. A related distortion appears when metaphysical unity is used to erase ethical difference. If all forms are expressions of the one reality, the devotee may conclude that every action is equally divine, every conflict merely ego, and every moral judgment evidence of dualistic ignorance. But unity of ground does not abolish difference of conduct. Cruelty and compassion may arise within one reality without becoming ethically interchangeable. A spirituality unable to distinguish unity from equivalence becomes morally blind. Sobriety requires the person to carry metaphysical depth without losing the capacity to name manipulation, violence, dishonesty, and responsibility. The correct devotional act may be refusal, departure, exposure, or protection of another person. Love without the freedom of the other. Devotion can become possessive toward the sacred itself. The beloved must appear in the expected form, answer in the expected language, protect the expected theology, and confirm the expected identity. The person says they surrender, yet demands that the sacred remain inside the image their need has constructed. Other people are treated similarly. Someone who leaves is fallen. Someone who refuses help is ungrateful. Someone who chooses another path has lost grace. The other is not allowed to remain free. They are absorbed into the devotee's world of meaning. This contradicts the essence of relation. Real love contains otherness. The beloved is not an object designed to complete the devotee, and another person is not material for the devotee's service, rescue, or spiritual identity. Counterfeit devotion loves most intensely where it can possess through meaning. Self-sealing through every outcome. The devotional world becomes completely self-sealing when no possible outcome can challenge it. If prayer is answered, God is loving. If unanswered, God teaches surrender. If the teacher behaves well, the teacher is pure. If badly, the teacher breaks the disciple's ego. If the community flourishes, it is blessed. If it collapses, persecution proves authenticity. If a prediction succeeds, revelation is confirmed. If it fails, the meaning was symbolic. A framework this flexible cannot be corrected by experience. A living devotional world must remain capable of admitting, I was mistaken, this was projection, this teacher failed, this emotional state did not prove what I thought, this institution used devotion to protect itself. This suffering should not have been spiritualized. Without the capacity to say I was wrong, surrender becomes epistemic captivity. The counterfeit personality. The counterfeit personality of this mode is the dependent chosen devotee. They may appear tender, humble, surrendered, and emotionally open, but their inner world is organized around remaining held, special, forgiven, protected, needed, or close to sacred authority. They cannot tolerate silence without panic, criticism without betrayal, or loss of an institution without feeling they have lost the beloved. They serve to secure worth, suffer to prove love, display helplessness to remain cared for, exalt the path to defend identity, and speak of surrender while resisting every truth that threatens the devotional world. The gift of devotion was relationship. The distortion is using relationship as protection from reality. The gift was remembrance. The distortion is inability to think outside devotional language. The gift was surrender. The distortion is surrender of adulthood. The gift was intimacy. The distortion is the need to be uniquely chosen. The gift was wholeheartedness. The distortion is sectarian supremacy. The clearest sign of failure is that the relationship no longer makes the person more truthful. It makes truth increasingly dangerous. The mode begins to mature again when dependency can be named, desire admitted, the teacher questioned, harm called harm, absence allowed to remain absence, other paths granted dignity and sweetness allowed to pass without the relationship collapsing. The devotee may then say, I may have loved sincerely and still misunderstood much of what I called love. That admission does not destroy devotion. It may be the first sign that devotion has become strong enough to survive reality. Testing it in life. The devotional relational mind is tested wherever love must become more than feeling, identity, or sacred language. Intense states, beautiful theology, powerful ritual, and long commitment do not prove maturity. The test is what love becomes in life. Can the devotee remain truthful when truth is painful, preserve agency while surrendering, love without possessing, serve without disappearing, endure silence without manufacturing despair, belong without surrendering conscience, recognize harm when it comes through someone sacred, become more capable of human relationship rather than less? These are not secondary ethical additions to devotion. They reveal whether sacred relationship has transformed the person or merely reorganized dependency around a divine center. The test of ordinary relationship. A person may speak constantly about love of God while remaining unable to listen, apologize, tolerate difference, respect boundaries, or sustain reciprocal intimacy. They may prefer divine love because the sacred figure does not interrupt, disagree, demand reciprocity, or expose limitation as another human being does. The beloved becomes refuge from relationship rather than its transformation. The mature devotee becomes more capable of meeting actual people. They do not require a partner, child, friend, teacher, or student to perform a divine role. They can love someone whose interior cannot be controlled, receive refusal without turning it into betrayal, and allow another person to remain partly unknown. Has devotion made the person more capable of loving those who do not mirror the beloved back to them? The test of boundaries and agency. Devotion praises surrender, service, obedience, and self offering. Life tests whether these coexist with boundaries and responsibility. Can the devotee say no, refuse exploitation, leave a harmful institution, protect body, money, children, time, and psychological stability without calling protection selfishness? Distinguish sacrifice freely chosen from sacrifice demanded by authority? A boundary is not necessarily failure of love. Sometimes it is the form love must take in order not to become complicity. The same test applies to decisions. It may feel humble to ask God, scripture, signs, dreams, guru, or community to decide everything, but this may conceal fear of responsibility. Can the devotee choose without absolute certainty, consider evidence, accept consequences, and say, I chose this and I may have been wrong? The real test is whether surrender produces a more responsible person or a more dependent one. The test of silence, sweetness, and viraha. Devotion is severely tested when the beloved appears absent. Prayer brings no consolation. The name feels empty. Suffering continues. No clear answer comes. This exposes what the relationship was expected to provide: protection, meaning, emotional regulation, chosen identity, or certainty that life was guided. Mature fidelity does not force silence to become a mystical lesson. Sometimes the person is exhausted, depressed, isolated, or in a lifeless environment. Sometimes nothing extraordinary is happening. The devotee must remain capable of ordinary explanation. But the absence of sweetness still asks whether remembrance can continue without reward, whether the person can pray without forcing emotion, and whether silence can remain silence without being theatricalized. Viraha requires the same severity. Does separation produce patience, humility, and fidelity, or fascination with one's own suffering? Is pain the consequence of love, or has pain become proof that love exists? Sweetness must also be tested. Can the person return from the festival, enter ordinary work, remain kind when the current has gone, and distinguish devotion from the pleasure of feeling devotional? Sweetness is tested by what remains afterward. Separation is tested by whether it deepens love rather than self absorption. The test of truth and authority. Devotion is tested by facts that threaten the devotional world: a weak proof text, a complicated sacred history, a teacher's wrongdoing, an institution's self protection, another tradition's genuine depth. Can love survive these discoveries, or must every apologetic structure remain intact? Mature devotion distinguishes the beloved from every claim made about the beloved, and the sacred from every institution built around it. A teacher may transmit something real and still fail. A scripture may carry profound truth and still require interpretation. A community may nourish devotion and still distort its history. The test becomes concrete around authority. What happens when the devotee disagrees, leaves, or exposes harm? Are they allowed to retain judgment, or declared fallen and cut off from grace? A path reveals its maturity not only by how it receives obedience, but by how it responds to truthful refusal. The test of service and suffering. Can the person help without controlling, give without creating debt, rest without shame, allow help to be refused, and stop when continuing causes harm? Service becomes mature when it responds to reality rather than preserving the identity of the servant. The devotee must ask not only, "How can I serve?" but, "What does this person actually need?" Suffering requires similar discernment. Can the person distinguish suffering endured from suffering imposed, sacrifice chosen from sacrifice demanded, discipline from cruelty, and acceptance from helplessness? A mature devotee may ask what suffering can teach, but first asks who caused harm, what must stop, and who needs protection. Growth after injury does not absolve the one who inflicted it, meaning must not become justification. The test of adulthood and human need. Can the devotee manage money, keep promises, care for the body, protect a child, work honestly, make decisions, apologize, and live without constant emotional regulation from the community? The path may speak of becoming a child before God, but can the person remain an adult among human beings? The test also includes admission of ordinary need. Can the person say, "I am lonely, I want affection, I am jealous, I am angry, I want a partner," or "I fear abandonment," or must every need be translated immediately into longing for God? A need denied does not disappear, it returns through projection, dependence upon the guru, idealized theology, or emotional drama. Mature devotion does not require God to replace every human relationship. It allows different forms of love to remain different. The body is part of this test. Can the devotee sleep, eat, seek medical care, acknowledge sexuality, and respect physical limitation without treating embodiment as a distraction from love? Can they distinguish ascetic discipline from punishment of the body and sacrificial service from chronic depletion? Devotion often speaks as though the heart alone were offered, but the actual offering includes nervous system, health, time, labor, and finite energy. A person who continually violates these limits may be praised as surrendered while becoming less available to truth, relationship, and responsibility. The body is not merely the instrument through which devotion is displayed, it is part of what has been entrusted. Caring for it can therefore be an act of fidelity rather than self-indulgence. The test of wholeheartedness. The devotee is also tested by whether wholeheartedness can coexist with intellectual humility. Can they admit uncertainty about doctrine without feeling disloyal? Can they distinguish the certainty of love from certainty about every metaphysical claim made by their tradition? Love may be absolute in commitment, while knowledge remains partial. The person may know where their heart belongs without knowing the final rank of every path, deity, scripture, or realization. The certainty of belonging is not the same as omniscience about the sacred. Confusing them turns intimacy into authority. Can the person remain wholly committed without requiring others to be lower? Can they acknowledge genuine holiness elsewhere without feeling their own love has been diminished? The inner statement, "For me, nothing surpasses the beloved," is natural. The test is whether it remains testimony or becomes conquest. If the path must continually repeat its superiority to preserve devotion, certainty may be doing the work love has not learned to do. The final test. The ultimate test of devotion is not intensity, orthodoxy, initiation, scriptural knowledge, obedience, longevity, or the number of sacrifices made. It is the fruit of relationship. Has the person become more truthful, responsible, stable through changing states, respectful of freedom, willing to protect the vulnerable, able to receive correction, less dependent upon being chosen, and more capable of giving and receiving? Maturity does not require psychological perfection. Devotional life may include failure, projection, dependence, and confusion, but the direction should be visible. Love should gradually make truth safer, agency stronger, relationship wider, and compassion more concrete. The beloved should not become shelter from life. The relationship should become the ground from which life is met more fully. The mature devotee can say, "I have been carried, and therefore I can stand. I have been loved, and therefore I do not need to possess. I have received, and therefore I can offer. I have surrendered, and therefore I must become more responsible, not less. I belong wholly, and therefore I do not need to diminish the belonging of others." The final test is simple and merciless. Can you love without using love to escape truth, adulthood, responsibility, or the freedom of the other? Traditions, exemplars, and configurations. The devotional relational mode appears wherever sacred reality becomes primarily addressable, lovable, memorable, and capable of receiving the person's life as an offering. Every major religious tradition contains devotion in some form. People praise, pray, give thanks, seek protection, mourn divine absence, and dedicate themselves to sacred figures or realities. Yet devotion does not always become the dominant mode. In a ritual tradition, love may serve the accurate enactment of sacred form. In an ascetic tradition, devotion may strengthen restraint and purification. In a visionary tradition, relation with the deity may organize revelation. In an analytical tradition, devotion may remain subordinate to correct doctrine. In a subtractive path, surrender may function as a means of releasing the separate claimant. The devotional relational mode becomes primary when sacred relationship itself becomes the central operation of spiritual life. Doctrine explains the beloved, ritual serves the beloved, ethics protects the relationship. Renunciation removes obstacles to remembrance. Community gathers around shared love. Liberation may be understood not as escape from relation, but as its perfection. The strongest exemplars are therefore not simply religious people who felt deeply. They are figures in whom love reorganized attention, identity, conduct, suffering, and the understanding of ultimate reality. Chaitanya, devotion as a total emotional world. Chaitanya represents one of the most complete historical embodiments of devotional consciousness. In Gaudiya memory, Krishna was not merely an object of worship or a supreme theological principle. Krishna became the center around which body, voice, emotion, community, scripture, memory, and identity were reorganized. The divine name was sung rather than merely contemplated. The body danced, wept, trembled, and fell silent. Sacred narrative became inward participation. Community formed around shared remembrance. The emotional world of Radha and the gopis became a grammar through which nearness, longing, presence, and separation could be inhabited. His later years at Jagannathapura became especially associated with viraha, love no longer sustained primarily by sweetness or immediate presence, but intensified through absence. This also creates a danger for later practitioners. Tears, bodily transformations, desolation, and ecstatic speech can be imitated more easily than the inward relation from which they arose. One can reproduce the visible language of separation without knowing the presence whose loss gives separation meaning. Chaitanya's importance lies not in feeling more intensely than others, but in the degree to which the whole person was gathered into relationship. His example also demonstrates why emotional resemblance cannot measure devotion. Utpaladeva, devotion within non-dual recognition. Utpaladeva shows that devotion does not require a simple metaphysical dualism between a human lover and a distant deity. As a foundational thinker of the Pratyabhijanya tradition of Kashmir Shaivism, he articulated a philosophy in which the deepest identity of the individual is understood through the universal consciousness of Shiva. Yet the voice of the Shiva Stotraval is not dissolved by non-duality. Utpaladeva praises, longs, remembers, surrenders, complains of distance, and seeks uninterrupted awareness of Shiva. The relation takes place within consciousness itself. Shiva is both the one addressed and the deepest ground of the one who addresses. Forgetfulness is therefore not separation from a distant being, but estrangement from what is most inwardly present. The devotee longs for the one from whom separation was never finally possible. The beloved is not only the one toward whom consciousness turns, the beloved is the light by which consciousness is able to turn at all. Utpaladeva prevents devotion from being classified as emotional religion for those unable to reach philosophical insight. In him, recognition does not abolish praise, and non-duality does not make address meaningless. Metaphysical subtlety deepens intimacy rather than replacing it. Ibn al-Farid, love passing through intoxication into sobriety. Ibn al-Farid presents one of the most severe poetic trajectories of divine love. Love first arrives as intoxication. Beauty overtakes the person, ordinary proportion collapses, and the world becomes transparent to one attraction. The lover appears to have forgotten himself because nothing remains outside the beloved's radiance. Yet the self may survive in a more refined form. The one who loves, longs, suffers, has been chosen, and demands union. The worldly ego becomes the heroic lover. This is where Ibn al-Farid becomes decisive. The beloved does not merely reward the lover's intensity, she exposes it. Beneath the language of surrender remains a claim. I must attain, I must be united, I must possess the fulfillment of my love. Even the desire for the absolute can become the final hiding place of the self. The lover may relinquish wealth, safety, status, and pleasure while preserving possession of his own devotion. His suffering becomes evidence, his fidelity merit, his longing identity. The final bargain is no longer, give me paradise, but because I love you, give me yourself. The object has become absolute, the claimant remains. Fana therefore means more than emotional overwhelm. It is the collapse of ownership. My love, my longing, my suffering, my attainment, my union. Love remains, but is released from the one who claimed to possess it. The beloved is discovered not only as the object of love, but as the power of loving, the eye of seeing, and the ground within which lover and beloved arise. Yet the trajectory cannot end in intoxicated proclamation of unity. Otherwise, the mystic returns as the possessor of the highest attainment. Ibn al-Farid's movement passes towards sobriety, salve, and return. The ordinary world reappears. Distinctions, language, action, responsibility, and other human beings return. But they return after the center of ownership has been broken. Sobriety is not a fall from union. It is union becoming capable of proportion. This return also protects mystical unity from becoming moral confusion. During intoxication, every form may appear transparent to the beloved, and all distinctions may seem secondary. In sobriety, the one reality is still recognized, but actions are again judged by their consequences and truth. The beloved may shine through all beings. Cruelty does not therefore become love. The sober lover can also meet another seeker without demanding reproduction of his own states. He no longer treats ecstasy as rank or his path as the universal sequence through which everyone must pass. Experience becomes guidance only after it has ceased to be private grandeur. The proof of mystical love is not that the lover has escaped distinction, but that they can return to distinction without rebuilding possession, superiority, or blindness. The mature lover can inhabit multiplicity without rebuilding separation, guide without turning experience into rank, and recognize unity without becoming morally blind to differences among actions. Intoxication reveals, sobriety tests whether revelation can enter life. Ibn al-Farid therefore embodies devotion, passing through its own fire. Love overwhelms the ordinary self, exposes the spiritual self hidden inside longing, breaks ownership of love, and returns the person to the world sober enough not to possess the experience. Maraba. Fidelity beyond imposed identity. Maraba represents devotion as a power capable of reorganizing social identity. In the poetic and hagiographic traditions surrounding her, Krishna becomes the true husband, beloved, and final center of fidelity. Social rank, family expectation, conventional honor, and imposed roles lose ultimate authority. Her devotional voice declares that society may define a role, but cannot decide whom the heart ultimately belongs to. Sacred relation establishes an inward authority not easily controlled by hierarchy, gender, class, or family demand. This can be profoundly liberating. Yet her example also raises a hard question. When does fidelity free a person from an unjust role? And when does it turn every earthly responsibility into inferior bondage? Maraba embodies the dignity of a loyalty deeper than imposed identity, while leaving devotion accountable to the difference between liberation and abandonment of responsibility. Teresa of Avila, intimacy joined to discernment. Teresa of Avila offers one of the strongest Christian examples of mature devotional relationship, because intimacy with the divine did not remove practical intelligence, institutional responsibility, or discernment. Prayer became friendship, inward encounter, surrender, and union with Christ. Yet, Teresa also founded and organized communities, traveled, managed conflict, negotiated authority, distinguished among spiritual experiences, and warned against confusing imagination or emotional intensity with mature union. Her configuration joins devotion and vision without allowing either to abolish adulthood. The more intimate the spiritual claim, the more severely it must be tested by humility, endurance, conduct, and responsibility. I experienced union is not enough. What patience, courage, truthfulness, and capacity for work followed. Teresa's maturity lies in refusing the division between mystical surrender and adult agency. Love enters administration, conflict, fatigue, decision, and sustained responsibility. The alverse, poetry, temple, and sacred particularity. The Tamil alverse represent a great historical formation in which devotion became poetry, pilgrimage, temple presence, sacred geography, and communal memory. Vishnu is encountered in named forms, places, stories, and gestures. This temple, this name, this moment of presence or concealment. Such particularity is central to devotion. Love does not attach itself to universality alone. It seeks face, form, memory, and place. Andal offers an especially concentrated configuration in which bridal longing, poetic imagination, communal ritual, and identification with divine narrative converge. The poetry is devotional, its preservation communal and ritual, its imagery sometimes visionary, and its reception theological. Yet the center remains relation, the soul's longing to belong completely to the divine. The Alvars show how personal love can become a shared sacred world without losing its particular voice. Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the architecture of devotional relationship. Gaudiya Vaishnavism develops one of the most elaborate spiritual psychologies of devotion. Hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, serving, friendship, prayer, and self offering engage the whole person. Rasa differentiates forms of relationship, reverence, service, friendship, parental affection, and intimate love, not merely as metaphors, but as structured possibilities of identity, practice, contemplation, and fulfillment. The tradition asks not only, do you love God, but what kind of love, what relation, what form of nearness, what obstacles and stages, what contemplative world corresponds to it. It also distinguishes pure devotion from devotion mixed with reward, liberation, knowledge, security, or social benefit. This acknowledges that spiritual love begins within a complex personality. Yet, the same completeness creates characteristic dangers. Emotional states can be imitated, viraha can become theater. Erotic and attachment needs can be translated too quickly into sacred identity. Internal hierarchies of relationship can become hierarchies of practitioners. Krishna's incomparability for the devotee can become a universal ranking of all paths. At its height, Gaudiya Vaishnavism gathers nearly every faculty into loving remembrance. At its distortion, every other faculty and path is valued only by its subordination to that center. It therefore reveals both the greatness and the enclosure possible within a complete devotional world. Sufi love remembrance, and the purification of desire. Sufism cannot be reduced to devotional love. It includes initiation, discipline, metaphysics, ethical purification, contemplation, poetry, and accounts of sainthood. Yet love becomes one of its most powerful currents. Remembrance transforms attention. Longing exposes the inadequacy of ordinary satisfaction. The human beloved may become a mirror. Separation, bewilderment, annihilation, sobriety, and return become languages through which relation is explored. Rabia famously represents love freed from bargaining for reward or fear of punishment. Ruma presents love as a force that breaks fixed identity and turns loss into movement, though his configuration is also visionary, symbolic, and metaphysical. Ibn al-Farid follows the demand of love into the final appropriation hidden in the lover himself. The danger is equally characteristic. Poetic intensity may substitute for transformation, pain may be romanticized, and submission to a guide may become absolute. At its mature height, Sufi love does not merely seek divine consolation, it purifies the one who claims to love. Christian relational mysticism. Christian devotion is shaped by incarnation. The divine is loved not only as invisible transcendence, but through a concrete life, face, body, suffering, death, and remembered acts. This gives Christian relationality unusual historical density. Love attaches itself to what Christ did, how he spoke, whom he touched, and how he endured abandonment and death. The cross also intensifies the ambiguity of devotional suffering. It can become a pattern of courage, solidarity, and self-giving. It can also be used to sanctify victimhood, silence resistance, or demand endurance of preventable harm. The imitation of Christ must therefore distinguish freely chosen sacrifice from suffering imposed by others. A theology of the cross becomes corrupt when it teaches the wounded to remain available to the one who wounds them. Christianity offers a wide relational field. Christ may be Lord, teacher, friend, bridegroom, suffering servant, divine child, indwelling presence, or crucified beloved. Mary may become mother, protector, intercessor, and model of receptivity. Prayer may take the form of praise, repentance, lament, gratitude, companionship, or surrender. Francis of Assisi represents devotion, becoming embodied simplicity, fraternity, and care. John of the Cross joins love to ascetic and subtractive purification. Consolation, image, certainty, and the felt possession of God are stripped away so that relation is no longer secured by experience. Christian bridal mysticism gives powerful expression to longing and spiritual union, but also demonstrates the ambiguity of sacred eros. Ordinary desire may be transformed, denied, elevated, or projected. Theological language alone cannot decide which. Christianity's essential corrective is the demand that love of God become love of neighbor. Inward intimacy loses credibility when it produces indifference, cruelty, or contempt for ordinary human beings. Hasidic devotion, cleaving within ordinary life. The Hasidic configuration also preserves humor, warmth, and ordinary human texture within devotion. Sacred life is not always solemn self-annihilation. Joy, dance, table fellowship, anecdote, and even the exposure of human foolishness can keep devotion from becoming abstract or morbid. This matters because some devotional worlds confuse gravity with depth and emotional suffering with seriousness. Hasidic joy offers another possibility. Nearness may appear as vitality, gratitude, and the sanctification of ordinary presence rather than continual longing for elsewhere. Devotion does not prove its depth by becoming unable to laugh. Hasidic spirituality offers another important configuration through the ideal of devekut, cleaving to God through prayer, intention, joy, story, song, community, and ordinary action. Eating, working, speaking, celebrating, and gathering can become part of relation. Devotion need not withdraw from the world in order to remain intense. Storytelling transmits sacred presence narratively. The tzaddik becomes emotionally near through remembered acts and sayings. This gives continuity and warmth, but also risks idealized authority. Devotion to God and attachment to the religious leader may become difficult to separate. Hasidism shows how devotion can sanctify ordinary life and how easily sacred intimacy can become concentrated around a charismatic mediator. Primary and mixed configurations. The devotional mode rarely appears in isolation. Many major figures combine relationship with vision, philosophy, architecture, ritual, or asceticism. Ramakrishna is devotional visionary. Kala is mother, addressed, loved, questioned, and encountered as living presence, while visions and altered states repeatedly make the relation immediate. His configuration is powerful, but should not become a universal standard requiring visionary confirmation of devotion. His example also shows how a devotional world can move among several sacred forms without reducing them to interchangeable abstractions. The relation remains concrete in each encounter, even when a wider metaphysical inclusiveness develops. This distinguishes lived plurality from detached universalism. The forms are not merely declared equal from outside, each must become inwardly real. Rupa Goswam is devotional architectural. He differentiates practices, stages, relationships, obstacles, and mature states with exceptional precision, but the architecture serves love of Krishna rather than constructing a universal comparative map. Abhinavagupta presents the inverse configuration, architectural integrative with genuine devotional fire. Ritual, metaphysics, aesthetics, initiation, mantra, and liberation are gathered into a vast Shaiva structure, yet works such as the Bhairavastava reveal praise and surrender that keep the architecture from becoming merely external classification. Utpaladeva and Abhinavagupta therefore form a revealing pair. Utpaladeva is primarily devotional relational with extraordinary philosophical depth. Abhinavagupta is primarily architectural integrative with real devotional intensity. Ramana Maharshi is subtractive axial with strong secondary devotion. His relationship with Arunachala is intimate and surrendered, but questions are repeatedly returned to the source of the I or to surrender of personal agency. Devotion embodies and softens the subtractive center. The subtractive center interprets devotion as the ending of self-possession. John of the Cross is devotional ascetic subtractive. Love remains central, but it is purified through darkness and the loss of every possessible spiritual state. Mixed configurations show that devotion can animate other modes without becoming their governing operation, and that other modes can discipline devotion without replacing relationship. The pattern across examples. Across these traditions, devotion takes very different forms. In Caitanya, it becomes total emotional and embodied absorption. In Utpaladeva, love deepens within non-dual recognition. In Ibn al-Farid, the lover's claim to possess love is exposed and carried into sobriety. In Maraba, fidelity exceeds imposed identity. In Teresa, intimacy becomes inseparable from discernment and responsibility. In the Alvars, love becomes poetry, temple, sacred geography, and communal memory. In Gaudiya Vaishnavism, devotion becomes a detailed psychology of relational possibilities. In Sufism, remembrance and longing purify desire. In Christianity, love becomes friendship, bridal union, service, darkness, incarnation, and neighbor love. In Hasidism, cleaving enters joy, story, community, and ordinary life. Devotion may therefore be philosophically sophisticated or simple, visionary or sober, ritualized or spontaneous, socially embodied or inwardly solitary, expressed through sweetness or darkness. What makes the mode devotional is not one external form. Spiritual life is organized around sacred relationship. The person asks not only what is true, what must be practiced, or what identity must dissolve. They ask, whom do I remember? To whom does this life belong? How can I respond? What has love made of me? At its height, devotion gathers the whole person without requiring every person to enter the same relationship. Its greatness is wholeheartedness. Its danger is turning wholeheartedness into hierarchy, dependency, emotional enclosure, or immunity from truth. The mature devotional world can say, nothing surpasses the beloved for me, without needing to add, therefore every other path must be lower. It allows the heart to belong completely while allowing the sacred to exceed the form through which that belonging became possible. Return to proportion. The devotional relational mind carries one of the deepest truths available to spiritual life. A human being is not transformed by knowledge alone. We may understand what is true and remain untouched. We may define love without becoming loving. We may speak of non-duality while protecting the heart from intimacy. We may perform rituals, master doctrine, discipline the body, interpret visions, and construct metaphysical systems while remaining unable to trust, receive, grieve, forgive, or give ourselves. Devotion enters where abstraction cannot. It addresses the part of the person that does not merely want to know reality but wants to belong. It gathers voice, memory, imagination, body, emotion, action, and longing around a sacred center. It allows joy to become gratitude, labor to become service, grief to become prayer, beauty to become remembrance, and life itself to become offering. This is not a lower spirituality. It is not philosophy simplified for emotional temperaments, nor failure to rise above relationship into a supposedly purer metaphysical state. The heart is not an embarrassing remainder left behind after the intellect has understood the absolute. The capacity to love is itself one of the great spiritual faculties, nor should its mature fruit be reduced to psychological health. Secure attachment, boundaries, adult agency, and ethical responsibility are indispensable tests because damaged relational structures can counterfeit devotion. But they are not the whole of bhakti. A psychologically mature person may still remain untouched by adoration, praise, surrender, or the felt particularity of the beloved. Devotion adds something irreducible, the capacity to be seized by value, to rejoice that the beloved is, to praise without utility, and to let the whole being become response. Its excess is not necessarily pathology. It becomes dangerous only when intensity demands exemption from truth. Psychological integration clears the vessel. It does not manufacture the wine, but devotion must remain under judgment, because no mode can imitate its own maturity more convincingly. Attachment can speak the language of surrender. Dependency can call itself trust. Helplessness can call itself spiritual childhood. Emotional contagion can call itself ecstasy. Possessiveness can call itself exclusive love. Unacknowledged desire can clothe itself in divine romance. Abandonment fear can become viraha. Hunger for consolation can become devotion to sweetness. Obedience to a human authority can present itself as obedience to God. Sectarian insecurity can sound like praise of the beloved. The person may cry, sing, bow, serve, sacrifice, and repeat the divine name for decades, while the deepest structure of loving remains largely unchanged. This is the severity of the path. Devotion doesn't mature merely because emotion has been redirected toward a sacred object. The structure of relationship itself must be transformed. The devotee must learn to love without possessing, receive without becoming passive, depend upon grace without surrendering adulthood, serve without becoming indispensable, remain faithful without constant reassurance, endure silence without manufacturing despair, receive sweetness without consuming it, experience separation without turning suffering into status, honor a teacher without surrendering conscience, and belong to a tradition without requiring every other path to be inferior. The kitten and the monkey must remain together. There are moments when the person can do nothing but allow themselves to be carried. There are moments when they must cling, practice, choose, protect, answer, and act. Grace does not abolish responsibility. Responsibility does not manufacture grace. The mature devotee can say, I did not create the love that called me, but I am responsible for what this love becomes in my life. This means devotion must survive reality. It must survive the discovery that a proof text is weak, sacred history more complicated than the community admitted, a teacher limited, an institution self-protective, another path genuinely deep, an intense experience less conclusive than first believed, or a prayer unanswered. It must also survive the recognition that the relationship once called purely divine carried projection, loneliness, fear, erotic displacement, and unmet need. Love that collapses before these discoveries was still dependent upon protection. Mature love can grieve the collapse of illusion without requiring the beloved to collapse with it. This is one of devotion's greatest tests. Can the relationship become strong enough to survive truth? The devotional world must also recover the freedom of the beloved. The sacred is not an object created to regulate the devotee's emotions, confirm specialness, defend theology, or guarantee the life they expected. The beloved is not possessed by being praised, controlled by being surrendered to, obligated by sacrifice, or confined to the image through which love first awakened. Real relation contains otherness. The devotee does not only ask, will you remain with me? They must eventually ask, can I love without requiring you to remain inside the form my need has prepared? This applies equally to human beings. Devotion should not make ordinary relationship feel inferior. It should make the person more capable of meeting another human being without absorbing them into a sacred role. A partner is not a substitute deity. A child is not material for a parent's spiritual identity. A teacher is not the beloved made controllably visible. A suffering person is not merely an opportunity for service. Another soul does not exist to confirm the devotee's theology. If love of God makes human beings less real, the path has failed. If it makes them more visible, more free, and more worthy of care, devotion has begun to bear fruit. The mature devotee may remain wholly given to one form of the sacred. They need not become religiously neutral or pretend every form is interchangeable. Love is particular. It says this name, this face, this story, this presence, this beloved. But particularity need not become conquest. The heart may say, "Nothing surpasses you for me." It need not say, "Nothing can surpass you for anyone." The first is love. The second demands that private absoluteness become universal rank. Devotion may be complete as a path without becoming complete as a map of every path. This limitation does not diminish it. A marriage is not less real because it is not every relationship. A language is not less beautiful because it does not contain every poem. A path is not less sacred because another soul is called elsewhere. The mature devotional mind does not prove love by placing others below it. It also does not need to explain away the ordinary beauty of finite things. A human friendship, a child's trust, music, humor, food, work, and the landscape do not become spiritually negligible because the beloved is ultimate. They can be loved in their own form, neither deified nor dismissed. Mature devotion does not flatten the world into symbols pointing elsewhere. It can perceive the beloved through things while allowing things to retain their finite reality. The flower may be a trace of the beloved and still be this flower, fragile and temporary. The person may belong to God and still be this person with needs, boundaries, and a destiny not reducible to the devotee's meaning. Love of the ultimate should deepen attention to the finite, not erase it. It loves. That is enough. At its height, devotion produces neither the helpless child nor the exalted emotional performer. It produces a person whose heart has become steadier, freer, more truthful, and more capable of response. A person who can bow without disappearing, serve without controlling, trust without refusing evidence, grieve without worshipping grief, rejoice without demanding permanent sweetness, remain faithful without becoming captive, receive love without making love responsible for every unmet need, offer life without turning the offering into a contract. Such a person may still cry, sing, long, and experience presence and absence with extraordinary force. But emotion no longer needs to prove the relationship. The relationship has entered conduct. It is visible in patience, courage, gratitude, apology, protection of the vulnerable, refusal of cruelty, the ability to stand alone when belonging demands dishonesty, and the willingness to remain tender without becoming blind. The mature fruit of devotion is not that the person feels more love than everyone else. It is that love has made the person more real. The deepest devotional question is therefore not, how completely have I surrendered? How intensely have I felt? How certain am I that my beloved is supreme? It is, what has this love made of me? Has it made truth safer? Has it made responsibility deeper? Has it made the freedom of the other more sacred? Has it made the heart capable of remaining open without possession? Has it made the person able to receive life as gift and return it without bargaining? The devotional path reaches maturity when the beloved is no longer used to escape the unfinished human being. The relationship becomes the place where that human being is exposed, educated, steadied, and transformed. Then devotion is no longer merely sweetness, longing, surrender, or emotional intensity. It becomes the slow transfiguration of the capacity to love. The heart is gathered, the hidden bargain is broken, the need to possess loosens, the fear of silence is endured, the servant becomes adult, the lover becomes truthful. The devotee discovers that being carried was never permission to remain small. Love, no longer used as shelter from reality, becomes the strength to enter reality without closing the heart. The final movement of devotion is therefore not, hold me so that I never fall. It is, because I have been held, let me become capable of standing, serving, seeing clearly, and loving without possession. At its best, the devotional relational mind does not ask every truth to kneel before its beloved. It kneels and rises more capable of love.